Welcome to Superchargers. I'm Daniel Thomas. Let's go. G'day, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. My guest on this episode is Amy Suto. Amy began her career as a Hollywood writer before hitting the road and becoming a digital nomad and freelance writer. Amy has just released the first book in her series, The Nomad Detective. It was awesome to chat to her as a fellow writer about her journey and the world of writing and publishing. Enjoy this one, guys. Let's do it. You started as a Hollywood writer. How was that experience for you, and how did you break into the industry?
Yeah, so I went to USC for screenwriting. When I graduated, I immediately threw myself to the wolves. I started working at a Hollywood talent agency as an assistant. And then from there, I just worked my way up the ranks until I finally got on a show and I got a chance to write an episode of my favorite spy show, the show Condor, that only lasted for 2 seasons, but it was based on the book and the movie, 6 Days of the Condor. And then I think 3 Days of the Condor was the movie title. And so it was really cool to be able to jump into TV and to work with the CIA agent who was consulting on the show to help us with the episodes. And it was a really fun experience. But when the pandemic hit, I took stock of everything and I was like, do I really enjoy being a writer in Hollywood? I kind of feel like I'm in a bubble. I noticed that a lot of the people around me are pretty miserable, and we're all supposed to be having fun playing make believe here. And so when I kind of got shook out of that kind of world when I was like, I want to travel, I want to see the world, I want to do things, I want to not just be looking at, staring at four walls of an office in Los Angeles. Even if we are creating story, if everybody's like not having a good time, then I want something different with my life. And so that's kind of what shifted me out of Hollywood, because I think that it just there's so many things going on in that world, and there are now today, like Hollywood is kind of like going through a sea change of sorts, and so it was kind of the time to get out and jump into the world of books and the world of being a digital nomad.
Yeah, that's amazing in terms of you took those steps, you got into the industry, but then it sort of drew a bit of a line in the sand for you, and then with stuff going on in the world, you then took a pivot. Sometimes it takes people years to be able to write on one episode. So it must have been awesome to see that come to life. But then for you to have that clarity is pretty cool too.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that when it comes to being a creative, I think the hardest thing is that sometimes when we're in these professional states and we're holding on to the dreams of like the 6-year-old version of ourselves, where it's like, I want to grow up and work in movies. And then once you actually get there, you're like, wait a minute, why is everyone like not happy here? Like, why is this not the thing that is lighting my soul on fire? And so if you get into an environment that, you've dreamed of and you think is going to be everything, and then it falls short, it can feel like you're giving up on your younger self to step away from that. But I think that one thing that has really helped me is understanding that me in the present need something different than what my dreams were before. And my dream of now is going to evolve and look a little bit different. And for me, when I left Hollywood, I had a new dream of being able to travel the world, help people by ghostwriting their memoirs, and then also writing books of my own. And so when that kind of started to clarify, I realized that I would be doing myself a disservice by staying in the industry and staying stuck. And I think that a lot of people can get really hung up on like that first dream that they have, and they never get to move on to that next dream or that next kind of stage or phase of life as a creative.
Yeah, for sure. And the the balance between commerce and art is an age old struggle. Um, I've had this tussle for many years myself. So to find this sweet spot between all of it is not an easy thing to do. So it's awesome that you're being able to do that. Um, and technology and everything is changing so fast. We're now seeing the exponential rapid growth of AI. Yeah, I'm curious as to how you've found a balance between this artistic life, writing and making a living, but on top of that, being able to be a digital nomad at the same time.
Yeah, I think balance is always the age old question. I think it helps to know that you're never truly fully in balance. It's kind of like when you're walking, like every step you're kind of always in balance. You're always in between steps. And so moving forward, there's always going to be something that's going to get a little bit more attention or something that's going to be a little bit out of whack. And I think also it's finding peace with the fact that everything is not going to be perfectly in balance and perfectly the way that you saw it in your head, and being comfortable with that while also designing systems to support yourself. And I think that that's something that I find really important, is that the systems design of life as a creative and somebody who's dealing with art and commerce is critical. And so that's kind of where I embarked on my journey as a freelance writer, to be able to support my life as a digital nomad and to also support my life as an author. And so my first book, Six-Figure Freelance Writer, kind of covered this weird journey to figure out, okay, how can I travel in the world and take Zoom calls from Italy? That was my first kind of mission for myself. I'm like, I want to be able to be out in the world experiencing things by day, and then by night, like hopping on a Zoom call to talk through a book draft with a client, and to be able to do the combination of both work for the people that I'm supporting as a freelancer, but also work for myself that feeds my soul. And having those systems and kind of creating different methods of being able to sell my services, but in a way that kind of still dovetails with building the skills that I need for every other part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome, that tricky balance. So Substack is something you use. I'm really curious to what do you like about Substack?
I love everything about Substack. I'm a little bit of like the platform's biggest fan, because I think it's bridging this really interesting gap between the death of blogs, like kind of like all of the kind of like news op-ed blogs, magazines, into this new form of people paying and supporting writers and creators directly. And I think that that's actually really exciting, because when we're losing some kind of this older traditional media, Substack is kind of allowing people to one-on-one support people by subscribing and becoming a paid subscriber to their publication. And so that's what initially drew me to the platform. And before then, I've been writing kind of on and off a newsletter for my own website. And when I was kind of starting to get into the world of Substack, some of my favorite writers ended up on the platform. And when I started to see kind of this shift, I also just really loved the simplicity of the layout of these newsletters. There weren't a ton of like images or fancy graphics or, things that were very distracting. It was all focused on the experience of reading and absorbing these people's thoughts and their work. And when I got kind of deeper in and saw the business model behind it, where it's in Substack's best interest to convert more paying subscribers to your publication and help you grow, because that's their business model. They don't charge you for using their platform, they just take a percentage of your earnings. And when I was using all these other tools that were very expensive, that were kind of clunky, I was like, I think I need to make the shift. And I was so glad I did, because one of the first emails I got from one of my newsletter subscribers when I switched over to Substack was, thank God you switched. Your newsletter is so much better now, and I'm enjoying it more as a reader. And that was like the first piece of kind of affirmation. And the second piece is when I turned on paid subscriptions a year ago, I was unsure if people would pay for my words in this format, because what I'm writing about on my Substack are things that I love, that I find really personally interesting. And I wasn't sure if people would find it interesting enough to subscribe, but I was on a mission to try and see if it would be interesting to other people. And I saw immediately, 3 days after launching my publication, I got my first paid subscriber. And that was just so exciting. And since then, I've grown my revenue to over $5,000 in annual recurring revenue. I've also seen a lot of increased sales in my affiliate links, in my services, in my products, my books through Substack. And it's kind of changed the way that I interact with my audience, and also has helped me grow a lot faster than with the other kind of tools that I've been using. And so I think Substack has just this incredible reach for creators, both on the organic side of Substack, bringing you new readers, as well as really serving your current readership much better as a creative.
That's very cool. I like what you're saying about the kind of purity of it. The thing that's like the sort of old school, even when like Twitter first came out, I sort of just liked that it was only text, because all these platforms were starting to, you'd have videos and images and ads and all this stuff. And I sort of thought, well, Twitter's cool because it's literally just text. But now, of course, now that it's X, or, there isn't that purity of writing to it. So like you're saying, the fact that you had just this simple thing, which also scared you in a way, because you're like, wow, this is just kind of really streamlined down. Um, that's really cool that it has that focus. I've also tried, like, I've tried to put articles on Medium and they just get lost in the sea of stuff. And it's really weird because you're trying to kind of get stuff through on Medium and then not much is happening. And then you receive like a royalties check for 1 cent, which is sort of them saying, "Hey, we're paying you something," and I sort of had a faith in that, but then I wasn't sure about that. So the fact that you found this on Substack is very cool and sounds like it's very rewarding. And as you say, it's a direct contact to your people, which is cool.
Definitely. And I think that that's the big difference between Substack as a platform versus social media is like you own your subscriber list. You can hit export and take your subscribers with you at any time. And I think that in the new creator economy, creators have to understand that what are you engaging in when you opt into a platform? What are you engaging in when you're spending and investing a ton of time in social media? And so understanding the terms that you're moving into, and then also how to make sure you're protecting yourself, because on platforms like TikTok or Instagram, not only can they ban you, but they can also reduce your reach. Like I have a TikTok platform that I've grown to 47,000 followers, but when I post things now, it's a lot harder to reach the wider audience than it was before. And so there's no explanation for that. There's nobody that you can go to and be like, hey, like all of these people subscribe to me. Why aren't they all getting all of my content? Or most of my content, or even why is the reach changed? And I think that creators have to understand that in order to fully own your audience, you have to bring them to your own email list. And email lists are still the one way that you can reach people, because everybody has to check their email. Like the most important messages come through email. And so I think that understanding how to spend your time on different platforms as a creator who is like self-sustaining and also trying to continue to nurture an audience is really important.
I'm finding it a bit tricky to even get people to read emails these days. So I know that I agree with you in that emails are that direct, more personal, but we're just flooded with so much. I guess, do you still try and make them as personal as possible?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things that I've learned as a writer is learning how to write to be read. And it sounds a little bit like overly simplified, but in reality, there's a lot of really interesting nuances to it. When we're writing to be read, we're trying to figure out what is the way that the text appears on screen and the things that are said just like hook the reader at every point. I know I follow a ton of different kind of like newsletter gurus, like the founder of the Morning Brew, and they're always talking about how they spend the most time on the subject line, and how like they optimized by having an emoji and this the beginning of the subject line of every email, so when people see that emoji in their inbox, they're like, oh, this is the Morning Brew newsletter. And so stealing techniques like that to understand like that readers want familiarity. When something comes into their inbox, they want to be reminded of who's been sending it to them. What can they expect when they open it? Is the subject line compelling? And then in the body of the content itself, what can you grab people with right away? And what is the promise the promise of transformation or education or entertainment that you're trying to sell to them by just reading this email? And I think that is like the hardest battle to win. But once you start to learn that, everything kind of starts to click into place. And this is something that I've learned through a lot of my work as a freelance writer, working with people who are trying to publish their books and trying to win the attention of their audience. It's so difficult to keep people reading and keep them invested in what you have to say. And it all comes down to that psychology of what is that first line that you're using to hook people, and how are you keeping them through? What is the rhythm of it? How are you writing so that readers will come and enjoy it? Not just writing because you want to write what you feel, but how can you kind of pass it through this lens of what your readers want to read from you?
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the Nomad Detective, how much of this is your fiction series? How much of your personal life have you pulled into that?
Yeah, so the Nomad Detective is inspired by a lot of my travels. There are stories that are pulled from kind of like things that I've seen and experienced in the world. It's all fiction. It's all, a kind of like a similar to like Agatha Christie, the Sherlock Holmes kind of adventures, but the places are all places that I've been and kind of pulled inspiration from. And so one of the stories takes place on the Inca Trail. Last year, I did that 4-day trek to the Inca through the Inca Trail in Peru to Machu Picchu, and it was everything that I expected and more. It was this crazy transformational experience where you're just kind of walking through the oldest ruins that you've ever seen, and your guide is like, look at all those stones. We don't know how they got there. Probably aliens. Let's keep walking. Like the amount of kind of immensity of these mysteries when you're walking through this 26-mile hike was just insane. And I loved that backdrop. And I wondered to myself, I'm like, why hasn't this been like a murder mystery? Why haven't we seen something where something goes terribly wrong on this trail and people have to figure it out and also do so in this incredibly ancient trek that has been done through by explorers and ancient civilizations, and there's all these ghost stories that are kind of associated with this path that you take to these ruins of Machu Picchu. And so it was like moments like that in my digital nomad life where when I had them, I was like, wow, this would make a great story. And then in January of this year, I was in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I just woke up in the middle of the night after having a conversation with friends about how there's like some crazy things happening in the community and like all these crazy crime stories. And I was just like, I feel like there should be a detective that solves these crimes. I think this would be really fascinating. Like there's so much that goes on as a digital nomad when you throw all of these expats from all these countries together, and they're all kind of living this life that doesn't feel real because they're completely cut off from friends, from family, and they're just thrown into the soup. Things are bound to go wrong. People are bound to behave badly. There's people probably on the run from the law and you have no idea. Like there's so many kind of interesting mysteries when you're in this community of digital nomads. So I wanted to kind of write a story about this detective who is on a hunt to find her lost sister, and she's trying to solve all these cases to get closer and closer and get more clues while also running into these different communities of people around the world.
I love that you're drawing from your experience as you go, which then feeds back to what you're doing professionally. Like it's all feeding into each other. Um, just like living the dream, really. um, did you self-pub? So you've self-published the first one.
Yeah, I think what people don't realize is there's so much opportunity in self-publishing, and I'm seeing more and more of the clients that I work for as a book ghostwriter run to the self-publishing instead. And I don't blame them. I think there's pros and cons of either self-publishing and traditional publishing. But I think what people don't realize that in traditional publishing, you have to wait 2 years to publish
Mm.
your book, even if the draft is done. You give up royalties along the way to your agent and the publisher, and like you kind of start to lose control of the project, and then you're a little bit at the whim of the notes that they give as well. Whereas when you're self-publishing, yes, everything is on your shoulders and you have to figure out how to do book marketing, you have to figure out how to get things out there, you have to figure out, what does the cover look like, but it's also an exciting there's so many exciting possibilities. And what people don't realize is that platforms like Amazon KDP are businesses within themselves. And there's a lot of people making stupid amounts of money on Amazon KDP publishing their books. And in a way that like there's a lot of material flooding these platforms, but there's also a lot of demand. People go to Amazon to learn things and to find different book topics, and being able to sell your books without having to fill up a warehouse full of print copies because Amazon does that all for you. They handle the printing of your books. They do all the print on the demand for you. They, sell your ebooks. They handle returns. They handle everything. So as an author, it's actually a pretty sweet deal to get 70% of your royalties through Amazon, and then you just have to handle the other pieces of it, which you would want to do anyways as an author.
I went through the self-publishing process myself, and I learned a heck of a lot. It was like like as you say, it was every aspect of it. I think one of my biggest issues or kind of downfalls with it was my lack of marketing knowledge or the best way to market. I also crowdfunded the book to do it, so it was a huge learning experience. But now, having spoken to a lot of authors as well, and questioning self-publishing, hybrid publishing, and traditional publishing. Um, the self-publishing is really cool. I think it's similar to the Substack. It's your direct line and your creative independence. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of potential in it, like you say. But yeah, it's quite the undertaking going through the. But I think once you do it once, you can refine that model. With the introduction of AI, I had an initial freak out as a writer and an artist and a creative. Um, and since then, I think I'm finding a reasonable balance in the way I use it. I would never use it to write because it's like that's our joy, right? Like that's why would I take the personal experience of writing away, but to use it in other ways that can help with just kind of general information type stuff. I get that. So I'm trying to find that middle spot. I'm very curious about your thoughts on it. And I know a lot of people are publishing AI written books, and it seems so early in this process to me that like I don't even know where like ChatGTP would pull that information from. And I've heard that perhaps it's just pulling it from other books, and it's like, well, that's not cool. Like it's not generating that information from nowhere, and who knows where it's pulling it from. And all of a sudden, somebody's pumped out a book, and then they realize that a chunk of it was taken from another book. Like that seems risky to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think AI is definitely a very divisive subject, and I think that there are instances where it works great, such as a lot of the rote marketing tasks. There's a lot of like content repurposing things I think AI is amazing for. But to quote Paul Graham, who had this amazing quote where he was saying that good writing is good thinking. And I think that that just feels so accurate. And that the moment that, the robots can think for us, we're all doomed.
Mm,
And AI won't get there at least very quickly. Um, and I think that right now it's like AI is doing a mimicry of writing and kind of pretending to, write a story. And like you can tell pretty quickly anything longer than like 2 pages, if you try to have it generate, the thread gets lost in the sauce. Like there's no
mm,
there's no coherence to it, and there's nothing deeper underneath it. And I think
mm,
that, while I think that if you want to like just throw a lot of like, things at the wall with AI, it's great for mass generating or kind of trying to repurpose something that already exists of yours. You give it a lot of stipulations, but almost the effort that it takes to train an AI and understand the data set and try to kind of get it to give you an output that is great, the moment that that AI model changes, it breaks everything. And so I think the unreliability of AI, people are starting to recognize. And so I also freaked out when AI first came out. I'm like, oh no, what's going to go on here? But then seeing the fact that AI is going to maybe replace writers that were not very skilled to begin with, but were kind of, assist people in honing their writing or kind of trying to clarify their ideas. But anytime that you're an intermediate to expert writer and you get to that place, you're faster than AI immediately. Like it's not something that can help you with the generation of raw material. It can help with some sort of kind of like idea generation brainstorming, I say, but
mm,
even that I find is really difficult to have it not only be accurate or because I was trying to find some information for the book. I'm like, like what is like the structure of the police force in France, and like trying to kind of like have it give me some information, and it was totally wrong. And I had to go to Google and I had to read a bunch of like articles about these cops that work in the catacombs and under Paris. And I ended up finding like the best information from pieces that were written by investigative journalists who were interviewing the police. I was like, of course, like AI is not going to know what is a good source, what is accurate, what to pull from. And I think all of those Google snippets that are going live of like Google's like AI tool, like telling people that if they want to be healthy, they should eat rocks, like just goes to show that like these AI pulling from like sarcastic Reddit threads and things that should
mm,
not be real for advice. And so I think that in certain cases, when it comes to, like scaling marketing or kind of repurposing content, it can be helpful. But the true heart of good writing is good thinking. And I think that when somebody's hiring a writer or picking up a book, you're not wanting to just be experiencing a mimicry of a story. You're wanting to be kind of taken into the hands of an expert storyteller or an expert writer to guide you through something, whether that is something as simple as a web page or as complex as a book.
Mm. Yeah, it's very surface stuff. It doesn't feel like there's much underneath it. And I just think there's no, you just can't replace personal stories, like the experiences that we've collectively or individually been through that can collectively teach us things. There's no replacement for that. And I think people will always crave that, you know, like you with the experiences you're drawing from. We've all had these unique things that we can offer. And I don't know how AI can do that. My concern is what a little bit what people are willing to consume, because it's changing and it's like somebody may I just think somebody may not be concerned whether it's been AI generated or, you know, but yeah, there's no replacement for personal stories and finding this middle, like you say, and um going back to the real source information is very important. What's your writing process like for you personally? Do you have a very regimented writing process?
No, I think the best way to kind of approach productivity as a writer is to create these like floating goals to help yourself without being too rigid, because I think that creativity can just be suffocated under something that is too rigid. And there are certain writers that thrive under this idea of, oh, I'm going to write every day, or I have like, this one kind of like daily schedule I'm going to do every day, and that's it. And I think that that works for some people, but for me, I really embrace the spontaneity. I'm also traveling full time. So, for example, next week I'm going to be in the Edinburgh Play Fest, and I'm going to be going to like 3 or 4 plays a day and like also kind of fitting in writing around that. And so because my schedule changes, I also adjust my writing schedule. And I think that the one hack that I think every writer can do to be productive is understand what is the total word count of the goal that you need to reach. And then on your calendar, just put like the blocks of time and the amount of words that you will need to hit that goal, and then the date you wanted to have it done by, and then give yourself like a week of wiggle room. And then what happens when you're moving through the day, if you don't hit your word count, you can move that block to another day. And then if on the next day you go beyond your word count, you can kind of shift things around. And so I think that also tying your productivity to word count and not, I'm going to write 3 amazing pages of poetry today, is really great, because when you remove the pressure to perform and being like, I'm going to write an incredible scene today or something like that, if you're just like, I have to get words on the page today, if they are not brilliant, that's okay. At least I hit my word count goal, and then I can worry about revisions later. And so that I think helps and releases kind of that pressure. And then almost counterintuitively, it makes you a better writer in that, because you're just sitting down on the computer today and you're like, I just have to hit this goal. Like, this is my goal for the day, and that's all I have to do. And if I really can't, make it, I can move this time block around. But if I'm here at my computer, I might as well just try and write something. And I think that as a writer who's been trained in the trenches of National Novel Writing Month, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it happens every November, and writers try to write 50,000 words in a month,
Mm.
and it happens every year. And I did that for 7 years straight, and I just like loved it, because even if you're just sitting there and just like, just typing nonsense, suddenly the hook of your imagination kind of attaches to something, and then you're off to the races. And so I think that it's all about momentum. And when it comes to productivity with writers, you just have to let go of that inner critic. You have to let go of, I have to write something great that's going to end up in the final draft today. You just have to like sit down and being like, if I am just going to type every word that comes to my brain, or write song lyrics, or just sit here and just kind of like recite the national anthem to get to my word count, I'm going to do it. But often when you're in the middle of like typing out like something that is on your mind, you will get an idea for a scene, and then you'll be off to the races. And so I think that it's kind of removing those barriers to just having momentum.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good approach. Makes it very tangible, breaking it down into these um, sections and basing it on words instead of trying to hit some kind of magical thing and then beating yourself up because you don't hit that. I just find if you're right, if you're aiming for say 90,000 words or something, it can get really overwhelming that to see it in context when you just have so much stuff. How do you kind of zoom out and um just when there's that sheer amount of words, to zoom out of that and look at it objectively and stuff can be quite tricky. But what you're saying
Definitely.
makes a lot of makes a lot of sense in that process. Um, it's a it's a I'm really curious to what you might say, because it's a tradition on the show to have guests offer some kind of challenge for listeners. Based on your experience as a digital nomad, travel has obviously impacted your life greatly, but also your writing craft or anything really. Is there something that's helped you on a daily basis, some kind of practice or challenge that you can offer the audience?
Yeah, I think that to every day try and pick one adventure to take yourself on. And that adventure can be big or small. I think that can be a small adventure like going out to and trying a new coffee shop, or it can be as big of an adventure as deciding to go and book a flight, or it can be something simple like going to a museum or being a tourist in your own city and doing a double-decker tour bus in Los Angeles, or something that puts you out of your normal routine and element. Because when you disrupt the thing that you do every day and you change something, suddenly your perspective shifts as well. And when I was living in Los Angeles as a freelancer and a TV writer, the thing that I would always do is like decide to write in a different location for the day. And so if I had a day off or a weekend day, I would decide to go and like write from like the Hammer Museum in Westwood, or Bodega Coffee in Santa Monica, which you can kind of smell the ocean from this like open door kind of coffee shop that turns into a wine bar at night. And so being able to be in different areas or go on a hike you haven't done before. And I think it just really rejuvenates creativity and allows you to feel more present than if you're just in the rote. This is what I do every day. I have every, weekend scheduled out for 10 months from now. Like instead of having that, really embracing the spontaneity of doing something new.
That's awesome. The perspective shift it gives you, I think that's really cool. And the adventure doesn't have to be something grand. Like you could say, just try somewhere new around the corner, like vary it up a bit, see what that brings. Even if you don't like it, something different gives a different perspective. So that's very cool. Where can people find you and your books and your Substack?
Yes. Everybody can find all of those links at amysuto.com. That's amysuto.com. The Nomad Detective Volume 1 actually came out today on Amazon, so it's now live for all my readers to check out. And
Uh,
so it's officially out there.
Congrats. That's massive. It really is. We're talking about writing, but it really is no small feat in terms of putting stuff out there with all the challenges that come with it, from just the practical stuff to the stuff it confronts within yourself. So massive congrats that's out there now. And I must say I'm very curious to read it, having heard a little bit about the inspiration. So looking forward. But I really appreciate your time and your clarity. It's been great. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Daniel.
There you go, guys. Honest ratings for the show on Apple are appreciated. If you have a guest suggestion, please feel free to reach out on my website at danielthomas.co. I'm also on social media at Mr. Dan Thomas. Catch you on the next episode.